Acclaimed guitar virtuoso Jennifer Batten has been involved in the music industry for nearly 40 years. From 1987 to 1997, Jennifer was the lead guitarist on all three of Michael Jackson's solo world tours. She also played in the 1993 Super Bowl halftime performance with Michael, which was seen by 1.5 billion people in 80 nations, the largest audience in television history. Jen has authored several books, including the guitar series Rock Sauce, The Two-Hand Rock, and the transcribed guitar solos of Peter Sprague. Jen has recorded several albums and toured with her mentor and rock legend Jeff Beck. Jen has released several of her own studio albums, starting with her 1992 debut, Above, Below, and Beyond. Jen currently collaborates with fellow accomplished guitarists and mentors inspiring guitarists with her online forum, Guitar Cloud Symposium.
Hey, this is Jennifer Batten, and it's time for Face the Music with Joby Rogers.
So thank you for joining me this evening, Jen. Much appreciated.
Yeah, good to be here.
So, legend has it that you were jealous of your sister's possession of a guitar, and that jealousy, along with your admiration of the Beatles and Jeff Beck, led to your desire to pick up the sixth string. So at 12 years old, you told Mom you wanted to be a musician. What was her initial reaction?
Very motherly. She said, you know, it's a very competitive business, darling. And when you're 12 years old, that doesn't mean anything because you haven't had your ass kicked yet. So it didn't deter me, but there's a reason I remember all these years later.
Was it unconditional support?
From her? Oh, yeah, my parents were great. My parents were really into music, especially my dad had a ridiculously large jazz collection. And now I have all of his CDs, so I have enough music for a lifetime. And they were great supporters of the local arts council, and we would have traveling musicians come in and stay at our house because we had kind of a big house. George Morel was one of the people. He was an amazing classical guitar player, so I got to see those people up close practicing in my living room.
When I say the song Forest Flower, what comes to mind?
Yeah, my dad was a big fan of Chico Hamilton, jazz drummer, who was extremely prolific, many discs. And it was the first melody that I learned was Forest Flower. Charles Lloyd played with Chico on a record. Don't ask me to play it now.
Around 1978, while attending the Musicians Institute in LA, was formerly known as the Guitar Institute of Technology, your classmate and guitar virtuoso Steve Lynch turned you on to 10-string guitar technique called two-handed tapping, which is basically 5 bass strings and 5 melody strings and no picking. So what drew you to that specific technique, and how difficult was it to master, and have you mastered it yet?
Steve, we got a seminar by Emmett Chapman, who invented the stick. It's most famously known being played by Tony Levin with Peter Gabriel and King Crimson. And Steve, a seed was planted that day on tapping, and and this was before Van Halen really hit, so it was completely a separate thing. And he just started to experiment. What would it be like if I had both hands engaged on the board? And he came up with a formula that I've been using to this day. It just knocked me out. It was so fresh sounding because, you know, at that time there was 60 students total. That was it. It was a very early days, the third class Musicians Institute ever had, when it was only a guitar school, long before drums, bass, keyboards, vocals, and all that. And, you know, 59 of us were thinking, well, we're just trying to get down these 6 strings. Nobody's going to go buy a stick and learn a whole new tuning and a whole new technique. But you never know what's going to plant a seed in somebody's head to just go off in a whole new direction. And at graduation, Steve played something he had worked out that I thought was just mind-blowing. So after school was over, because there was too much stuff to get down during the school year, as soon as we graduated, I said, man, you got to send me a demo of things you're working on. And he did, and I tried to work it out. And at that time, I was only using one finger of the right hand. I didn't know what he was doing, and it sucked. So I drove to his house to take a lesson, and that's when it really opened up for me. Ah, this is how you do it. So I just started experimenting from there to see all that I could do, and it was so fun and so fresh at that time. It was 1979. And then shortly after there, Van Halen started really climbing. And so I was listening to anybody that was tapping, Randy Rhoads, whoever, which was kind of slim pickings back then. But, you know, now it's standard fare for people.
Can you give us an example?
So, for instance, most people would play an A minor pentatonic scale, like, and if you use two hands and skip strings, what's that? It's a lot quicker. So one of the things I took on was to play Flight of the Bumblebee, because picking it, you know, I could do maybe 160 beats a minute, which that's way slower. But then you get rid of the pick, and all of a sudden, you know, speed is possible. So that was one of my motivators, because I thought I was one of the slowest people at that time in the school. And I think I was the only one that never had gigged before.
Now, is tapping something you master or something you continually work at?
Everything in music is something you continually work at, and you never arrive anywhere. There's little plateaus, like I'm better at sweep picking today, and then better at tapping today, and, you know, hopefully it just keeps progressing for the rest of your life.
Your ballad, In the Aftermath, from your whatever CD, in my opinion, it's one of the most advanced tunes of yours that I've heard. It's really on a new level, no doubt about it.
Thank
Do
you.
you retain any pressure from your past works when you write new material?
Well, I'll say I never sold enough records that the record company would pressure me to do anything. And the record company on the last two records was me. So it's all about what will entertain me, what ways do I want to grow. And because there was a lot of time between records, each record is very, very different. The debut record is all over the map, where I got John Coltrane's Giant Steps, and I got some metal, and I got Flight of the Bumblebee, and, you know, just a little bit of ethnic music, which I love. And the second record was several years later as a band, and we produced it ourselves with Glenn Sobel on drums, who's now with Alice Cooper, and Ricky Walking on bass. And that was just an experiment of love. I came in with very raw demos, and we worked them out. And, you know, in hindsight, I probably should have cut each song in half, but we were having a good time. And then the third record was everything I wrote for Jeff Beck when I was with him. And he turned, a lot of people think I got him into techno, but it was the exact opposite. He was listening to bands like The Prodigy and Crystal Method back then, and turned me onto that music. So.
Didn't he turn you on to electronica also?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that really opened up my mind to sounds, you know, doing things very differently with really killer drum loops. You know, anything goes with sonically nowadays. And he got me into, well, his recording process was fascinating. And it inspired me to buy a Pro Tools system. It was over 20 years ago, back when it cost as much as a down payment on a house. You know? Now you could get it in your phone. Yeah, it was really fascinating how he did it. And the producer on his record, was it You Had It Coming, was fascinating too, where they had a really killer British drum programmer in one room. It would just come up with these grooves. He'd send it across the hallway to Jeff and the producer, and Jeff would just react to it. You know, he'd just go off. And the producer was quick enough where he'd go, okay, I hear that melody, bam, 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 cut, paste. And he would make songs out of it. You know, Jeff plays so melodically anyway, so it's, you know, what melody do you want to grab and call that the verse?
When I was researching Jeff, I saw his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Did you ever see that? Like, I should be happy, but fuck them. They kicked me out. Just you gotta look it up. It was hilarious.
Yeah, there's another one where he was asked to do a appear for Rod Stewart's induction, and Rod got stuck in L.A. because it's right when the earthquake happened. And Jeff said, "You know, Rod and I have had a love-hate relationship over the years. He loves me, and I hate him." He's really funny.
So, with the success you've had now, what are some of your personal attributes that you bring to the table to help you succeed?
Uh, to help me succeed, uh, just years in the business and learning and getting my ass kicked and observing what it takes, observing what people do wrong, including myself. You know, I think number one is don't be a dick, right? You know, because so many people are, and so many people are so insecure about their skills that it manifests in different ways. And some ways just manifests in being obnoxious.
Right.
And who wants to work with that? So basically, I think that the people that are going to really be successful in music, and you know, there's different levels. Right now, I'm thinking of as being a sideman, is doing your homework, number one, which a lot of people just don't do. A lot of people think, you know, I'll get it at rehearsal. And that is a quick way to be booted out if you have a band that's got their shit together. So doing your homework and just doing your job, you know?
Right.
And especially if you've got a star on stage, don't try to upstage them. Know your place. With Jeff, I was just happy to be in the band. I would have been happy to play banjo in that band. And he gave me some solos, which I was glad to do, especially when we had a trade. It was super fun. But I'm not going to be the one saying, how about giving me a solo in this song?
Right.
You know, it automatically puts somebody in a really awkward position. So just be really sensitive and try to suss out what the leader is going to need from you. And 99% of it is support. You want to be supporting the leader so that they can soar and have a good time and do what they do to the best of their abilities.
Speaking of Jeff, I guess the story goes you attempted to set up a meeting with him in the UK when you were doing the Michael Jackson tour. And unfortunately, Michael Jackson's gig stopped in the UK for some reason. But you eventually met him at his studio, and you gave him a VHS tape of you doing Flight of the Bumblebee.
Yeah.
And never expecting to hear from him again, lo and behold, out of the clear blue sky, he calls you and offers you a gig with him. And you became friends. I think you even attended his wedding.
Yeah.
You rubbed elbows with Paul McCartney and Jimmy Page. Do you believe in the power of thinking and wishing things into existence?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And in general, you don't want to be too specific. You know, before I got the Michael Jackson gig, I used to focus every day for a long period of time. I would just visualize myself playing in front of thousands of people. Because I had been going to those shows. You know, you immerse yourself in the direction that you want to go. I was spending all day listening to music. I was involved in playing with bands. And so I would envision myself playing for people. I would envision myself doing interviews because I would read interviews with other people. And I would think, what if the interviewer asked me that question? What would be my answer? And I think it's a domino effect, really. Whatever you're immersed in, you're going to pull things towards you that have to do with that. Now, if you have a specific goal, like I want to be in David Bowie's band, but David's passed on, it ain't going to happen. At least not in this dimension, you know? So when I got the Michael gig, I never expected to play with Michael. I just wanted to be in a big band playing for lots of people. With Jeff, all I wanted was an autograph. I just wanted to make that connection. I learned every solo on 2 records, on Blow by Blow and Wired, and at one point I could play along with all of those because I was just obsessed with his music, and it was long before the internet. I would go to a record shop and surf through old British music magazines, New Musical Express or whatever it was, just hoping to find some information about him because it wasn't like the internet where you can just dial up Jeff Beck and get 1,000 interviews and just see 1,000 shows. This was the olden days, so I put a lot of effort into digging up what I could.
While on tour with Beck, he asked you to take the lead vocals on a Muddy Waters song. I think it was Rollin' and Tumblin'.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you to come out from behind the guitar?
Yeah, let me tell you the backstory because it's really wacky. Imogen Heap had sung the track on the record, and I knew we were going out to tour, and I knew Imogen wasn't going to be on tour with us to sing one song. And so, in the meantime, I had met up with a friend of mine that worked for the IVL Corporation in Canada. That this was over 20 years ago. It was the beginning of the vocal processing units. And he told me about this device they had coming out really soon that was a vocal processor that would pitch correct. You could preset the vibrato that you were going to have. You could make yourself sound like Elvis or all these different things. Sounded like super magical. And so I called Jeff up and I go, hey, I'm going to volunteer to sing this song. I don't know if I told him about the box at the time, but a month later, I'm in rehearsals and the box ain't ready. so I'm stuck with me.
Uh-oh.
Now, that was kind of daunting, but one thing I had going for me was it was a blues, so the first two lines repeat, so there weren't that many lines to remember. And so I sang it, and I did have some trouble with it from night to night. Sometimes it felt great. And, you know, being another guitar player on stage with Jeff Beck, to not have a guitar on during that song was very freeing. It felt like, okay, I'm in this whole other category now. But then there were some nights where it felt really off and I couldn't correct it. And it turns out I was flat or sharp, like the whole song. And I just couldn't correct it. And I got a whole new appreciation for real singers that you do not have frets in your throat to rely on. And so one thing I had them do was I was always stage left, and I would have them turn the guitar off at that point because it was so loud. I thought that's, you know, when you have volume and the pressure going in your ears, it can really distort your reality of pitch. I don't know if that helped or not, but I stopped singing after that.
You gained a whole new respect for singers after that again.
Oh, big time, big time.
So you and Beck have a completely different kind of style of playing. When I saw you guys on stage together, it emulsifies flawlessly. Describe the chemistry you think or you share with Beck, both on and off stage.
Well, off stage, he's a hoot. After the shows, he was a comedian. We always had 2 bottles of champagne waiting for us after the stage. I think I drank more alcohol in 3 years than I have in my entire life. So it was always super silly. And all of his friends are comedians, you know, a lot of British comedians. So after every show, we would watch something like the intro to Austin Powers, da-da-da-da-ba, and it would just crack him up. Or the rabbit scene in Monty Python, or Robert Tilden, the farty preacher that you can find on YouTube. You know, we'd watch that stuff and just crack up every single night. And he's really smart, although he wouldn't ever say that. And he has a really sharp wit. So he was super, super fun to be around. And musically, I think, in part because I was so into his playing, you know, that I would spend 1,000 hours really digging into all the different songs and trying to be like a forensic scientist and find out why did I like that and what's he doing there. You know, having that, for a leader to have that energy in the band as opposed to here's another gig and you got a good player. I was like, dude, I'll polish your shoes to get in the band. You know, I'll play for a cup of coffee. You know, that energy is infectious. And of course, you're going to feel supported that way. We had a real good relationship, and we stay in touch from time to time. Now, I saw him last year before lockdown. I had a gig near his home, so I ended up hanging out with him for a bit.
You said your goal during a performance is to take people places with your music.
Yeah.
Help them escape. To what extent, especially nowadays, do you feel music has the potential of being in an actual way to possibly change people's ideologies?
That's a stretch. I mean, I'm coming from, I'm not all that into lyrics. There's certain people where the lyrics just move me for one reason or another. Um, you know, political songs, I think, are pretty much preaching to the choir. If somebody's got a left-leaning song, then that's where they go. Or Toby Keith has a "Go America" song, then you get that crowd. You know, I don't think it's going to change people. But I will say, going deeper, frequencies do. Frequencies are healing. They get into your bones, and I tell people, man, and I've known this more in the last 5 or 10 years than ever in my life. I mean, very consciously, that if I'm having a shit day and I go in the studio and jam for a couple hours, I stand up a different person. It changes your brain chemistry, and I find it very soothing and healing being able to express. And it's one thing for a player, but it's also another thing for people that don't play, that listen to music. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that people are so into music, is whether they realize it or not, it's healing on a level.
I've researched regarding goosebumps, and there's only a small percentage of people who actually get goosebumps when listening to music. I'm one of them, thank God, but it's not a big percentage, so it is chemical. It does, your body reacts to it without your brain. I mean, it is there.
Yeah. And then you get the group energy at shows. I went and saw Annie Lennox one time, and I wasn't, I mean, I like her, but I don't own any records. I'm not a super fan or anything, but a friend of mine was playing drums with her, and as soon as she hit the stage, the audience lost their minds, and I started tearing up. It's just that group energy that is so positive and uplifting, and we have this hero that's about to preach to us. You know, very powerful impact.
I just had my first show since March, this past Saturday, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until we started. It was so bizarre. I mean, everybody was crying. You know, the dancers and everybody was like, we just missed that vibe, and it's sad that entertainment in general, artists are kind of on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to getting things back to normal.
Oh yeah, you know, I have a real negative attitude about it. Like, I've had so many tours canceled, and people are postponing to November and then to next spring and then next summer, and I'm just going, yeah, put me on the books, but I seriously doubt anybody's going to show up.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm doing the Guitar Cloud Symposium. I'm all in, and I can reach way more people potentially online than I ever could, jumping from venue to venue, and, you know, missed connections and all the horrific thing that happens with travel. But I will say, back to your other thing of playing live, I got to play a couple summer shows at wineries, and I said it felt like an exorcism. I mean, seriously, you got all these demons from the stress of being locked down and having your life upended, and who knows what's going to happen. Nobody has any idea what's going to happen, and that anxiety. And I wasn't playing that much, and so having a gig forced me to get my chops back in order, and playing for people and at that time it was a max of 25 people, so they were totally spread out outdoors under a tent, and yeah, man, it was super healing for me.
Yeah, our max was 100 people at a 300-seat venue, and you know, it was weird, but those 100 really wanted to be there. I once asked you if you had any strong personal opinions that have changed over the years, and you replied to me. You said yes, that America's democracy is safe, and it's shaking up the entire world. Do you still hold that conviction?
Wow, the conviction that the democracy is safe?
Yeah.
No, it's not safe at all. It's very fragile.
Minutes ago, they showed Trump at a rally from last night. He said to his supporters, you know, Joe's going to be in there, and what if he gets shot? Then we have Kamala.
I'll say it. He's an asshole. It's so nasty, and it's making his followers be nastier people than they ever would. You
Yeah.
would not put up with that behavior with a kid or even your boss. You would
No.
quit.
Yeah.
But it's working for him for angry people.
So in that vein, with more and more artists on both sides of the fence using their platform to speak out politically, what do you think the role of artists specifically needs to be in today's political climate? I mean, do you think it's better to use your voice and risk losing fans or not say anything at all? Are there boundaries?
I think it's up to each person. You know, that's a tough thing. You could, well, look at the Dixie Chicks, right?
Yeah.
They didn't approve of Bush going to war, so they lost their careers. Boom. It's you don't know the reaction from
Yeah.
people, and
That's the
I've been
tricky
I've
part.
been pretty vocal
Yeah.
um, on my personal page, but that's before I started Guitar Cloud Symposium, so I don't put political stuff on that. If people research me further, they'll see where I'm at.
Even though we're artists, we still have the right to speak. I mean, we're still citizens.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to saving the democracy, people
Yeah.
with those big voices, if they feel the need, they really need to do it, and right now,
Yeah.
because in December it's too late.
Michael Jackson.
Yep.
You worked with Michael on 3 massive tours over 10 years. Before all of that, what was the audition process? Was it a love at first sight between you guys, or did you have to go through the gauntlet?
The audition process was really strange. I asked what songs I should learn to the guy that called me on the phone, and I don't remember. I mean, his biggest hits, Billie Jean, Beat It, whatever. And so I took several days off to make sure I had him down, and then I went in and there was no band there, which was surprising.
Ooh.
It was just a guy with a video camera. And the only guidance I was given was to play something funky, because that'd be 99% of what was required. So I had been teaching a lot at Musicians Institute at the time, and I was into funk. So I just improvised something I had been working on, and then I started improvising a solo. And I was super into tapping at the time, so there was a lot of tapping, which I didn't realize. I got a hold of the tape, the audition tape, about 5 years ago, and saw what I played. It was really interesting, because I thought Beat It is what got me the gig, but it wasn't the strongest thing on the tape. And then I played Giant Steps. It was before my first record came out, and I did a tapping version of Giant Steps that ended up on the record. So I played that and ended with the Beat It solo. And 20 years later, I get the tape, and there was also his notes in there where he had all these names, and next to my name there was a star that he drew, and then he wrote "great" with a couple exclamation points. And I go, who doesn't want to frame that?
Awesome.
So,
So you get the gig, you rehearse for a month. For the first time, Michael walks into the soundstage. Walk me through that experience. What was your first impression?
well, first of all, nobody ever told me I had the gig. It's just nobody was sending me home. Yeah. Uh, I got the call. He was interested. Come down, play with the band, and see how it goes. And I was subbing out all my work day after day after day. Nobody said a word. Next thing I knew, I had a passport and a ticket to Tokyo. It was 1 month with a band in one room, singers in one room, dancers in another room, basically getting down the Victory Tour, because we had live cassettes, so we could get the tempos from that and the forms, because with the dancing, some of the forms were not like the record. And then the second month was in a huge sound stage with Michael and the sound effects, the pyro, all everything, costumes, everything. So we spent a month doing that. But I will say, I think on the last day of band rehearsal, Michael came in with Frank DeLeo with his cigar, and ponytail. This looked like such a mafioso. It was hilarious. And so we met Michael. Those of us that didn't know him were introduced to him. And I remember going up to him thinking, man, he was just radiant, just gorgeous, perfect teeth. Everything was perfect. It was really exciting. So next thing I know, I'm in Tokyo, and Even then, I mean, Sheryl Crow was on that tour, and both of us were insecure because we weren't getting any feedback. Yeah, we're on the tour, but this is just one leg of the tour. Are we gonna last? We don't know. And Michael shut down the Tokyo Disneyland so we could hang out alone. I mean, just the staff and the band and stuff, performers. And Cheryl and I were looking at this Daisy Duck toothbrush holder in one of the shops. This is the kind of shit I spend my money on, right? And you would take Daisy's head and push it down, and it would come back up slowly, and the eyes would go back and forth for as long as you were supposed to brush your teeth. It was just the funniest thing ever. I'm sure I have it somewhere. But Michael came up behind me. I didn't know he was anywhere near, and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I like how you're playing the Beat It solo." And that's when I really felt like, okay, job security, I'm in this. But I never took it for granted that he was going to call me back tour after tour.
That's amazing.
I will say, I got called for the Dangerous tour and then the History tour, and then I had flown to London Heathrow. I had a long layover for something when I didn't even know This Is It was happening, and the TV was on in a cappuccino shop, and that's when he announced the London dates. And all of a sudden I thought, but I'm thinking, okay, that's me. I'm going to be on these dates. And then he ended up choosing Orianthi. Half my age. But honestly, if I had gotten in that gig, I would have spent a bunch of money on new gear that I couldn't pay off because it all exploded.
Performing with Michael introduced you to a whole new level of mass hysteria and just huge audiences. How did you collaborate that new onslaught of attention that you were exposed to? Because you were relatively untried and green at that point in your career. Were you frustrated at any point when you came to the realization that it wasn't only about the music?
That didn't really hit me until the History tour when I had that ridiculous S&M outfit.
All that.
And at that point I go, this is theater. I am playing a character. That's how I got around dealing with that. But, getting interviews with guitar magazines is what I always wanted. And it was difficult to go from the mindset of somebody that's playing in 5 different bands, just hoping people don't throw shit at you, when you're on stage with 2 other bands during the night, to being in the biggest tour in the world. It's a ridiculous launch nobody could prepare for. So it took some getting used to, and there was a lot of jealousy.
You said that there was lots of jealousy from fellow guitar players.
Yep.
That's hard to comprehend because this is Michael Jackson. If you're not good, you're not getting the gig. That's it. Explain the jealousy to me.
Well, I would say it was the same with the dancers. They went through the same thing. It's just like you're in this little family and you're on this level, and all of a sudden somebody pops out and it's like, hey, who do you think you are? I mean, even one of my close friends felt like that. He admitted it after a long time because they all want to be there.
Michael's a perfectionist and notoriously known for not making eye contact with others, especially on stage.
Yeah.
I guess it's a fear of a distraction for him. Was that frustrating to you? Because you guys were really close on stage, especially during your solos.
Yeah, it was frustrating, but I understood where that was coming from because at rehearsal one day we played, I don't know, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough or something, and he came right at me, looking me in the eyes, and got next to me and started dancing. When he turned around and walked back to the front of the stage, he was singing a different song. It was the same groove. I think it was a technique to avoid distraction.
Was the bondage look and the hair yours or theirs idea?
Michael hired an artist to draw up a look with 3 different costumes for every performer on stage.
Okay.
And it was Michael's idea to make me stand out. I don't know if the platinum hair was his idea or the mohawk. Yeah, I don't know for sure, but that's how the paintings ended up.
Right.
And so after the paintings were approved, then the wardrobe people would take measurements and make the wardrobe come alive, and the hair and makeup would make that happen.
Your time to really shine during those tours was Beat It, originally done by, we know, the late, great Eddie Van Halen. Was there any pressure to replicate Eddie's original sound, or were you given license from Michael's camp to put your own imprint on it?
It was never discussed. For me, the thought of improving something that was already perfect didn't even cross my mind. I had been playing that song in a cover band for just about ever since it came out, and and still have an incredible amount of respect for that solo. And on most tours, I think the audience expects the solos, especially if it's a hit record, they expect to hear it as it was on the radio. And so it was never discussed. So I just did it.
Could we get a little sample?
I have to dive down to a pedal board. But I will say, while I'm doing that, one of the things that was really interesting is when I was playing it with Michael, it didn't feel right. And I wasn't digging it. And I thought part of it was I got these friggin' lasers on my head, and I'm attached to a computer, and blah, 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 and I had the staging happening. I found out after a couple months that the reason was we were playing it much faster than the record, much faster. And so I think if Eddie had been given the tempo that we played it at live, it would be a completely different solo. Because there's so much meat and emotion that goes into every aspect of that solo that when you zip it up, and it happens with a lot of songs, you just remove what was originally created. Another one is Working Day and Night, not the solo, but that song is such a mid-tempo thing, and we took it to the races. And that's the problem with a lot of tributes, is they insist on doing the live tempos, and if you don't have the funkiest players in the world, you're going to screw it up.
Not going to work.
And that's one bit of advice I tell people is, like, if you're going to raise the tempo, which a lot of people do to make it more exciting live, you don't have to take it up that far.
Right.
Especially Working Day and Night. I mean, put those two side to side and you go, Jesus, what was he thinking? You know?
That's,
yeah, it's off to the races. It's crazy town. So yeah, I'm sure I'm going to be playing the solo for the rest of my life, and it's a challenging solo, and it's the kind of thing that if certain things don't pop, I get depressed for the rest of the solo. So let's see if I can get my hands in here. He starts with the tremolo bar almost at probably touching the body, so you hear it come out of hell like. And I know he got this part from Alan Holdsworth, because Alan had this thing where he would start flat with notes and then bring it into pitch, like.
Have you ever crossed paths with Eddie?
Yeah, there was a time between legs of the tour on the Bad tour that I was going to play with my old band, and Eddie was next door at another rehearsal hall, and he wanted me to come over and play the Beat It solo for him. So I ended up doing it, and it was really interesting because anytime a guy puts their guitar on me, it hangs really low. And plus, I keep my tremolo bar, like, if I flick it, it's going to stay there. Anywhere I put it, it's going to stay there. And his was loose. It would swing. So anytime I needed it, I had to take an extra millisecond to find it when I played it for him. And then he wanted me to show him how it went, you know, because he had played it, he had recorded it with Quincy years prior, several years prior, and he never played that song with Van Halen. So, you know, he just needed to be reminded and picked it up very quickly. And it was really interesting, too, because I would have given anything to have a smartphone camera at that time. But he was doing certain things, like I do this, switch patches again, forget about it. But I do this one passage where I think he does this ridiculous stretch that would send me to the hospital. So I use my right hand to tap and get the same notes. So it's fascinating. You know, that's the thing. Unless you see a guitar player's hands on a video, you're never 100%
Right.
certain where on the neck they're playing those notes.
June 25, 2009. Hit us all, especially tribute artists, very hard.
Yeah.
I've always regarded Michael as an extremely sensitive person
Mm-hmm.
who just basically wanted a near impossibility of everybody to love him. And I think that all artists, no matter what level you're on, at some point you surrender to the pressures and aggravations of this business. And Michael dealt with this on a massive level.
Yep.
Frankly, I don't know how any human being could take that level of burden and still remain mentally sane and happy. Some navigate through it, some are conquered by it. And even you personally discovered a more sinister side of just having access to Michael Jackson when tabloid trolls and hangers-on would come around you looking for information. How did you not give into that temptation of quick, easy money?
I think my mama raised me right. You know, there is a right and there is a wrong, and to abuse people that way, like somebody wanted to give me information for somebody that wrote for the National Enquirer to send them dirt or something, and I thought, you know, I grew up thinking and still think the National Enquirer is bullshit. You know, it destroys lives so
Yes.
people can make money. So why would I do that? Especially, I just been given this gift of being able to tour with him and get paid handsomely. Why would I stab him in the back? I mean, why would I do it anyway? But I was so horrified by that attempt that, you know.
I've turned down because I've got a lot of calls from like spoof movies, like Scream, things like that, to portray Michael in a negative light. And I just wasn't interested. I'm like, why would anybody want to do that? It just, and there were some other tribute artists that ended up doing it. And
Yeah.
I just questioned that. I mean, you know, what's the point?
Well, it's like power. Fame is like power. Fame can give you power, and it's you know, it's a teaser. Some people can't resist it.
It was discovered after Michael's passing that Michael struggled with depression, anxiety, insomnia, some paranoia, and to some level, some drug addiction. He even confided in you, I think, at one point that he felt like an old man inside. So in 97, at the end of your tenure with Michael, he released the haunting song Morphine, which was attributed to his struggle and dependence on Demerol. You stated that you were aware of his struggles. In retrospect, were there any signs, or what were some of the signs that you may have witnessed? You said you had anger about what had happened. Has that subsided? And
No,
have you been able to properly mourn him yet?
I don't know if I ever did mourn him. I mean, the biggest emotion was sadness for his kids.
Right.
I mean, how messed up to have your, especially a single parent, taken from you at such a young age or ever. But no, it's the hunger from the press for clicks. You know, now it's clickbait. It was a different thing back then, but uh, uh, so many people, rather than research the truth of anything, will just copy and paste, get the job done, get the paycheck, and move on to the next thing. And man, if you see that film, Social Dilemma, oh, I mean, it's people that worked with Google and Facebook and Twitter and all those that bailed because they saw what was happening. Is the more salacious you make something, the more people are going to click on it because it strikes you emotionally.
Right.
And that's the whole QAnon thing. You know, you can take any conspiracy theory, and as long as you can hit somebody emotionally to draw them in, and then you write a story around it, they go, oh, it must be true. I read it. You know, I took the time to read it. So, Oh,
That's
and it just pissed me off that the whole thing with Michael, and even after the fact, I was in his band for 10 years, and I get people talking about the kid thing afterwards, uh, like I believe the tabloids. Are you kidding me?
yeah.
I was on the inside. I got the inside story, and it's just horrifying how you can get people to believe anything.
You really can't. Because
And
I,
it's so easy to destroy people.
yeah,
You can make a Hollywood movie about them and make it dramatic, like the last kids did. Build a story around it, have dramatic music around it, and all of a sudden people go, "Oh, it must be true. I saw the movie."
and their talking points and their accusations are so easily to disregard. I mean, they're so
Yeah,
easily to prove wrong. It take minutes sometimes,
yeah,
but people don't even take that time.
no, uh-uh.
It's said and it's true, and that's it.
Yep. One of the things I felt when he passed is relief for him because he would wake up every day with that shit in his face. And how do you get past that, especially when you're a super sensitive person like that? You're innocent and your voice cannot get out and convince people.
Were there any signs for you of his struggles?
No. No, I never saw it. He was always consistent on stage. We would always have a group prayer before we played shows. Um, whether it was a bad, dangerous, or history tour, it was always very consistent.
Yeah, because you kind of saw that in This Is It, where knowing what he's going through at night back at his
Yeah,
at his home, and then seeing him at the rehearsals, it was amazing. And he was amazing at rehearsals, and to know under all of that was this incredible struggle on a daily
yeah,
basis.
yeah. I mean, most people could not deal with that life. He had
No,
the advantage of starting gigging when he was 5 years old, so he grew up in it. But to see all the evil and the people trying to get from you all along, you don't know who you can trust. So of course he's shut down,
right.
and he's not going to confide in anybody.
Even
So
family.
no, the family was the worst. They wanted stuff from him too.
And This Is It, the movie. I really respected the fact that it simply showed Michael the genius at work. It didn't project him as a deity. It wasn't mournful. It just showed him at work. Is that how you remember him?
Oh yeah, very professional. You asked earlier if he was a taskmaster or some term like that, and it never hit me like that. He had a certain thing that he expected from people, and we all rose to that. Greg Fellengaines was a musical director on a couple tours, and we would have things completely together by the time Michael joined us. And he would have things videotaped, rehearsals were videotaped, and he would study those. It's hard enough to go 8 hours dancing and singing and rehearsing. The last thing I would want to do is to see a videotape afterwards.
He taught by example. If I'm going to give 110%,
Yeah,
so are you.
yeah, yeah.
So
And we would get notes in the morning, and we would work on the stuff.
if you, Jen, were allowed to release just one song of Michael's and you could share with the world, which one do you think it would be?
Human Nature is my favorite. It's there's no guitar solo in it. It's just beautiful harmonies. The way he sang it was like an angel, and I also have the look of my position, seeing him in the middle of the stage, burned into my memory. And he had the best dancers in LA, and not this song, but other songs, they'd be dancing together. And even though all the dancers were doing the same moves, there was a certain grace that Michael had that was a step above. And just to see him sing and move, and yeah, it was just gorgeous, very ethereal.
So last question about Michael, nothing to do with Michael at all, actually. 3 phrases. Amsterdam, Frank DeLeo, pot brownies.
Yeah, that was one night that blew the hell out of my mind. You know, I mean, you hear about rock bands, especially metal bands, doing drugs and just carrying on, throwing TVs out the windows and having girls around and the whole thing. And none of that was part of Michael Jackson's, well, for the most part, uh, none of that was part of the tours. Nobody was doing drugs. We'd drink from time to time, but there was no alcoholics on the tour or anything. And after we did a show in Rotterdam, we had decided we are going to drive to Amsterdam, and we had all the Italians. We had Frank DeLeo, his friends Saul and Vinny, and
You're already in trouble there.
no shit. I think there was three of them, a couple security guards, and then all us girls. It was me and Sheryl Crow, and two makeup artists, and maybe another girl or two. I can't remember. But so we drove up there. Well, first we were told to meet Frank in his room, and we meet. And he's sitting there cutting up pop brownies. We're in Amsterdam, you know. And I mean, I had smoked pot before, but I hadn't done it in years. And my first thought was, oh, I ain't going there. Next thing you know, I went there. And we're halfway to Amsterdam, and everybody's laughing their asses off. Everybody's high. Fortunately, we had a driver that was not. And we arrived in Amsterdam, and it was late at night, so the only thing open was the hookers, right? It was so bizarre at night, and it was not raining, but very misty. And just the atmosphere of being high and seeing this mist and seeing the lights in the windows with the girls. And the first thing I remember is we went to a public restroom, and I got locked in the stall. I couldn't open the door.
Wait. How do you get locked in the stall? Isn't that where the lock's at?
Well, it was stuck. I don't know.
Travel. You've been on the road for decades now.
Yeah.
Actually, this is my 36th year as a tribute artist.
Wow. Congrats. How's your body holding up?
You know, speaking of that, like I said, Saturday was our first show since March.
Ouch.
And the body in my brain was not the same body that I had. It was...
Yeah.
The next day, the next couple of days was a serious recovery effort.
Well, you know, I mean, obviously it's way worse for you dancing, but it's the same with guitar.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I play all the time. And then since lockdown, I just got lazy and was doing other things, trying to figure out, you know, how do you get through a pandemic? And it was the same thing. You know, it doesn't matter how much you play at home. Once you get on the stage, it's another animal.
Yeah.
And I knew I was a long way from my peak performance.
Yeah.
And the next day your hands hurt just because.
Yeah. During the pandemic or during the lockdown, I still would run through the show at home, like once every 2 weeks, just run through it, just to keep going.
Good for you. Yeah.
You know, to be ready. Being on the road now for decades, how do you carry the heritage and legacy of your music forward through all of this time, but still keep it relevant and fresh for yourself, as well as new fans that you connect with?
Well, I think the best attribute a musician can have is boredom. And being bored with yourself automatically pushes you to do new things. That's why the three records that I did years apart are completely different, because my mind is in a different place. I'm listening to different things, and I'm bored with what I did before. Especially once you do a record, by the time you're done mixing, you have heard that so many times, you don't ever want to hear it again, you know, until you get years away from it. So I think that's just an automatic thing to want to grow, right, to want to do different things and explore different genres, and then being inspired by other people that are pushing boundaries.
Right. Speaking of that, I mean, is rock and roll progressing in a way you like or dislike?
You know, I'm so off the grid. I don't even know what's happening out there. I don't listen to the radio. I listen to things I get turned on to. And I've always had a very not mainstream taste in music. I listen to people like the Crystal Method. They're doing StageIt.com shows. I find that really interesting. I like to listen to stuff that is not what I do. You know,
Right.
it blew my mind one time. I read an article by Jason Becker, and they asked him who his favorite artist was, and he said Bob Dylan. And I'm going, what? Bob Dylan? That is so night and day different from what you do, but it makes sense now. So I'll listen to country players, I'll listen to acoustic players and techno and just things that are completely away from the norm for me.
I think a lot of artists, the good artists, their influences, they have a wide range of everybody for their influences, every musical genre, from classical to country and everything in between.
Yeah, I think it's really healthy because it creates splits off of different fusions of this and that
Right.
to create something new. I mean, just take something simple like the Police. Okay, that started out as a punk band, and it was kind of pop, punk, rock, Bob Marley, and that brought reggae to the world like reggae didn't do before.
Right. I interviewed I don't know if you know Chris Thomas King.
Oh,
Did you see Oh Brother Where Art Thou?
oh yes, love it.
He was
Yeah.
the blues man in the movie
Oh,
that
fantastic.
ran with them.
God,
And
the music in that movie is
yeah,
awesome.
and I was just talking to him, and he gave me a whole education on blues music because he said, people think that blues came from the Delta and Mississippi and from slavery, and he schooled me that the basis is New Orleans. Nothing to do with the slavery or any of that. Because he's
Huh.
a little upset with the Grammys because he submitted his album last cycle, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah, it's
And they
very
gave,
political.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then they gave the Grammy for best blues artist to the Rolling Stones.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, it is pretty bullshit. I can't even watch that anymore. The award shows are just like,
Yeah.
oh God, it's about, how many clothes can you take off and get away with it?
um, Back to travel. I travel quite a bit, and the one thing that I am completely grateful for is that travel it's fatal to prejudice, bigotry, narrow-mindedness. I mean, you basically learn that all people cry, laugh, work, worry, and die, no matter where, what, when, how. Is traveling a similar experience like that for you?
I would wish globe travel for
Oh,
every American to get outside of the damn bubble and see how the rest of the people live. Man, I have been so inspired by different cultures. You know, as soon as I see that, two things pop up immediately. When I was around Mexico City with Jeff Beck, and we got a tour of the agave plant. You know, I think that's what it was. And this woman was showing me how the tips are needles, and you can pull off the needle and thread comes with it. And that's how they sewed for years. And then she showed us like 15 other things you can do with the plant. You know, the natives have so much knowledge from millennia that you forget. And self-sufficiency because you have to. And then my other thought was Japan. How
mm,
much I've learned from hanging out with Japanese for 25 years and how respectful they are of each other. And I often mention this where it blew my mind one time. I was in this high-rise hotel, and I'm in an elevator, and everybody's trying to get to their destination. This one girl gets out, but before she leaves, she reaches over and pushes the button to shut the door so that people can be on their way quicker. I mean, we don't think like that. We're
no,
all about me, me, me.
yeah,
Let me get to my thing. And another thing they do that so much of the world could learn from this is there's a line that's like 2 or 3 feet away from the luggage belt. If you don't see your bag, get the hell away so people that do see their bags can get them. It's just like a no-brainer. And the third thing I'll say is at stadium shows, you got 50, 60,000 people together. The first show we did with Michael, people were released by rows or by sections. So it's not this big clusterfuck of people going, I got to get to my car. I got to get out of the parking garage before anybody else. It's orderly because somebody thought it through. You know?
I mean, I toured China in the early 90s. Early 90s.
Wow. Oh, that's rough times.
And I grew an extreme appreciation, first of all, for American toilets. That was my first appreciation.
Oh yeah. People have no idea. No idea. Oh, you take it. I mean, China's one thing, man. You go down to Indonesia with, I dislocated my knee and had to navigate a public toilet. And oh, lordy,
The
lordy,
squatting.
lordy. How I didn't piss my pants, I don't ever know.
Yeah, the hole in the floor, basically.
Yep. Yep.
I remember in China, my TV got one government issued channel, and it played only one English speaking show at 7 a.m. in the morning. And I got up religiously to watch that show.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at the time what it was until I got home, what I was watching. I got up every day at 7 a.m. to watch the Teletubbies
Oh, hilarious.
because it was
Okay.
the only English I heard every day. And I made it a point to get up and watch the Teletubbies at 7 a.m. every day.
I did a clinic tour in China several, God, it must have been at least 10 years ago now. And it was the first, or maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago, it was the first time any of the stores that I played at had a clinic. And they didn't know about monitors. They didn't know about cables. There were several shows where I just played at the edge of the stage so I could hear the monitors that the audience was hearing. It was rough.
For some reason, I was part of a whole show, so I was in the middle of another show, and the Chinese audiences felt it rude to interrupt you with applause. So they'd wait to the entire end of the entire show
Oh,
before they
no.
would clap. So
So
every
you think
night,
you're sucking.
I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my first night, I'm like, boom, and it's like crickets. I'm like, they hate me. I'm like, I suck. I'm like,
Oh,
um,
man.
performers need the road, no doubt about it. And this pandemic has caused a lot of us, I'm sure you included, to go through an extreme version of our normal in-between job insanity. How have you been coping?
Uh, I would say pretty bipolar, you know, because I have, like I said in the beginning, I just went in the corner, fetal position, sucked my thumb for 2 months. But once I was able to see this as a sabbatical and a chance to regroup and do something completely different, then I had a new focus. But still, the lack of community
Yeah,
that you get when you're playing, it grates on you in ways that you don't realize.
yeah,
Because 5% of our brains are conscious, 95%, there's all that shit going on that you wake up and want to jump off a bridge and you're not quite sure why.
right.
It's
Yeah,
like, it's rough. It's rough. And I think I have it rough and I have it good compared to a hell of a lot of musicians.
yeah, because most of my friends, especially tribute artists, they're out of work. And a
Yeah.
few venues that I played are not coming back ever.
Yeah.
They're just done because they're nonprofit. They don't have the money. Opening 50% is not going to pay their bills. In August, you launched the Guitar Cloud Symposium.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's kind of an extension of a seminar I put together 5 or 6 years ago, and I took around America with my motorhome. I played in almost every Sam Ash store in the country, plus some colleges and different venues. And it just hit me from doing some Skype lessons that there were things that consistently I found students didn't know that I thought they should know. And so I set about to educate the planet.
Is it more for inspiring artists or all levels of guitar players?
Well, it depends on the module that I was doing, and I worked it out like TED Talks, where each thing I want to talk about was 20 minutes, succinct, and then move on to another thing. Like one of the modules was travel, all the things I've learned in travel as a musician. Then there was software about the best way to learn music, and I don't have a list in front of me of all the things I did, and I brought a buddy out on a road to break it up with a different person to look at, and this, I kind of stopped doing it because I got busy with music and other things, and so it's been a while since I did that seminar. which was called Self-Empowerment for the Modern Musician. And after feeling sorry for myself in the lockdown, I kind of downloaded the idea one day of doing the same thing, but version 2.0, and having more people in for variety, for different musical styles. And this is much more musical than the seminar I was giving. So I launched with Neil Brosh, who played with Tony McAlpine, and everybody that I get in, I want them to have years and years of stage experience, recording experience, and teaching experience. So when you have those three things, I call it a smorgasbord. You get 24 different modules over a 4-day period. And like we had Angela Petrelli in this last time, and she brought in slide guitar and hybrid picking and social media marketing because she's an expert in that. So it's a smorgasbord for just about everybody. We go back and forth on, is it for beginners? Well, beginners will get a great deal out of it, but if you actually know the names of the strings and some basic chords, then you're going to get even more out of it. So we're talking about putting out a video that said you should basically at least know this amount of basics before you jump in with us. But we're doing it every 2 months. I want to keep this going and going and going, and now we're adding the deep dives. The next launch is going to be November 14.
Okay.
Then we have another, that's going to be a single day on recording a record. And there's going to be 4 of us doing 90 minutes each on different aspects of recording a record. Then in December, we're doing the Guitar Cloud Symposium 4-day thing again. And everybody's got ideas. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. Something we did in the second one, was it last weekend or 2 weekends ago now, is do breakout rooms in Zoom. So every 15 minutes, you get smaller groups of people that have time with each teacher. Every 15 minutes, you get a new teacher. So we're just experimenting in ways to make it better, sound better. We're doing surveys after the fact to find out what did you like, what did you not like, and then we adjust. So I'm really excited about where this could go. In a year from now, it's going to be off the chain.
After the pandemic, that you'll incorporate this into what,
Yeah.
after getting back on the road and everything, you'll still continue this?
I'm actually pretty burnt out on the road. I would like to go out and maybe do a festival, be gone for a week instead of 6 weeks, and make this my main thing, because 30 years of broken guitars, missed connections, and all kinds of fuckery that can happen from touring. It's really, really stressful.
It is.
And the potential of something online that can reach people that couldn't get to me even if I toured is much greater.
So what were some of the challenges for the symposium that, as far as the research, literally, psychologically, logistically?
Well, I had an advantage because I put it together years ago. The basic modules that I'm doing now, it's just, just by being alive and wanting to learn things, you study recording, things that you do to prep for a gig, or just things that you do. And it's just a matter of pretty much taking stuff that's already in your mind that you have learned, and I say putting it in a nice reduction sauce down to 20 minutes. All these modules, we could just blab and blab and blab, but 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, it's been shown that that's about as long as your brain can hang without starting to spin.
Your artwork, are you still creating? I think you were doing stained glass or fused glass art.
Yeah, no, I left glass and I got into doing steampunk art, thus the gears. I actually have zero free time right now because the symposium is starting a new business and it takes all of my time. So I wish I had time to goof around and do art. I have zero time.
Do you miss it?
I do, yeah. That's when I'm happiest, is when I can actually go, I could take 4 hours out today and make a fantasy airship.
Any plans on anything new writing wise?
Yeah, I work for truefire.com doing courses. They're not books, although they're in talks with a company that will take our courses and turn them into books. So I'm not going to have anything to do with that. Somebody will just translate it into a book. But yeah, they want me back for some things. And actually another thing that they're doing that'll come up in I think it'll be ongoing, but I'll be doing it twice in November, is online jams, where I'm playing, and I do the same thing in the Guitar Cloud Symposium, where I have a track playing, and for instance, I'll play a blues, and I'll trade fours with people. So I'll solo for 4 bars, and then I'll play chords for 4 bars, while the audience is playing 4 bars. So I'm not hearing them, but that's the best we can do to jam right now until the latency is down to 0, which
Right.
5G will probably do, except we'll all have cancer, so you can only jam for about a year.
Now, this is all done through Zoom, right? As far as the participants,
Yes.
how many do you take at a time?
Uh, the last 2 classes were about 30, um, which is good as it's building, because I'm the one that's communicating with everybody and keeping a log of who bought what. And then we got all, God, the sponsor giveaways just about killed me. There was so much stuff that was given away, and I'm the one that's packing up everything and shipping it off to people, which took a solid 2 days this last time. So I'm telling the sponsors, 5 is enough. 5 is enough. You don't have to give straps to every person.
Like school teachers, do you find it difficult keeping their attention?
No,
Really?
no. In fact, you know what? The feedback is so much better than I could have ever hoped. I'm watching all the other teachers' modules, and sometimes they're going, I don't know, that looks a little stiff and boring. And people are writing back just going, this was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Thank you so much for doing this. And, in the surveys, I like this, this, and this. And they're all coming back. Even, I intended this to be a smorgasbord. Get new students every time, and we teach the same thing. But that's not what's happening. They all want to come back every time. And so we're changing up the modules. There are certain things that I really want people to know, like brain science and the best way, the most efficient way to learn. So I can change it up a little bit, but I want the basic information to be the same every time. But for instance, in the first symposium, one of my modules was on chops, how to get faster. And here's how I got faster. Here's the scale patterns, the interval patterns. And to me, it's not that interesting. So for the second time around, I go, look, all that stuff is on video. It's in your folders. Everybody's got folders. And anybody that contractually is able to give away their music, we give all of our CDs away as digital downloads. So this last time, I traded out that module and I did Intro to Guitar Synthesizer. It makes it interesting for me, and it gives the people that are returning something new.
So, what would be your advice to new guitarists? Because every kid gets his first guitar, and they either grab onto it and it goes forever, or they get bored and they move on to something else. What can you say to grab them, to make them go? Because I guess you got to get beyond that trial period where it's the frustration of it and all that. What's your advice to grab them, to keep them in there?
Well, I think it's important for them to have a teacher. And what's even more important than that is, if they don't like the teacher and they don't resonate with them, don't quit. Find another teacher and another one until you find somebody that's really keeping you engaged. If you, there was one time, well, when I got the Michael Jackson tour, I had, 15 students at some store, and I gave all my students to another guitar player that was a really good player, and all the students quit. They did not like the way he taught, even though he was a really great player. So that's a big deal. The personality of the teacher, if they're really into teaching. There's a lot of free information online, but especially in the beginning, it's really easy to be doing things wrong. Like
Right.
the thumb. The thumb is something that I find consistently that students, I have to keep saying, put your thumb back, put your thumb back. When you're bending, put your thumb over the top. Just choo, choo, choo. So to have somebody guide you for at least a couple years, I think is really important.
Did you have any formal education for guitar playing?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, I started taking lessons the day I got a guitar. I was 8 years old, and it was at a music store, and the guy taught me how to read music. He taught me how to read music notes. I was learning Yankee Doodle, the names of the strings, the names of the notes, basic chords, And then as the family moved a couple times, I would end up with different teachers. One was really into finger picking, folk music, so I learned different techniques with the right hand. And the next guy I got was into blues, then a rock teacher, and I think that's good. You know, I try to spoon feed theory, because jamming that down somebody's throat that just wants to play an Eagles song might not go over well. So if I do, in a half-hour lesson, if I do 10 minutes of, okay, learn this arpeggio, learn this other arpeggio, now let's get on to, you know, Hotel California or whatever you want to learn, because that's the candy. Right. You learn the foundation, you get the tools. You know, here's what a hammer does, here's what a saw does. Now let's get into designing a house. Thank you very much. Be well, be safe. Thanks. Well, I hope I get to play with you someday. And okay, thanks. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you down the road. Okay, bye. Bye.